Hello, friends, and welcome into episode 4 of A Level Deeper. I'm Chad Miles. As you may know by now, one of the things that I'm endlessly fascinated by is something that I like to call the dream gap.
Are the things that I say are my priorities and the things that I want to nurture and cultivate in my life, is that aligning with the behaviors and the things that I'm actually doing?
That's today's guest, Renee Chevrier, and on the show today, Renee and I explore this idea of the dream gap. It's this space that exists between having a dream or vision for what you want your life to be like and your current reality. Maybe you're kind of struggling with this now in your life, or maybe you felt it before and can relate. But if you have felt it before, what do you think gets in the way? What keeps you from pursuing the unique vision you have for your life? What are you afraid of?
It's really hard a lot of times to press pause on your life. I almost feel like that's where I'm at right now in my life, as I am doing a pause. I left my job and I'm in this new spot, but I don't know where I'm going next.
Today, Renee takes us into what's behind the pause that she is taking in her life right now, why she made that decision and all the things that have led up to it, and how she's approaching what comes next. I think this one was especially fun because this is so new for Renee, and she's going through this experience right now, and that's why I wanted to bring this conversation to all of you. Hey, before we jump into today's episode, would you mind doing me a really quick favor? Whatever app you're listening to these conversations on, would you mind taking a moment and just scrolling down and leaving a rating for the show? It would mean a lot to me, and it helps new people find these episodes, so thank you in advance for being willing to support the show. So without further ado, here's my conversation entitled Embracing the Pause with Renee Chevrier.
The place I was interested in starting is last week. I reached out to you. I sent you a text and said, "Hey, do you want to come on my podcast? I'd love to have you on and have a conversation." And your response was, tell us about what your response was.
So first I said, I'm super flattered and honored that you would ask me. So I was like surprised and I guess just like it felt really good that you asked me, and because I have a lot of respect for you and I've heard the content that you've created before and I think it's really awesome. So that was my first reaction. And then I was like, oh shit, wait, I've never done anything like this before. And I'm at this place in my life right now where I was like, I want to start saying yes to more things that make me feel uncomfortable, and really challenging myself to try new things and see what things blossom from that. And so I said that, yes, I want to be uncomfortable, but if I'm really bad at it, you can always just not post it, right? And then you sent back a hilarious text, but also very authentic and Chad-like, where you said, this is just a conversation of humans having humans, and then yada, yada, yada. And then that was like a nice way of saying, I'm going to post it no matter what, which I thought was hilarious. So yeah, I'm in.
I love it. Tell me about this. As you say this, you're in this period of your life where you want to say yes to things that make you uncomfortable. What brought you to making that decision that this period of my life is when I want to do that?
So I think it was probably like 3 or 4 years in the making, to be honest with you. I'm typically a very rational and planned out person. I like to have goals. I like to be like meeting those goals and like following a plan. And I think probably maybe in like late 2019, I started, well, actually, shout out to Eileen and Kelly at the space. I remember going to the release class for my first time with Eileen, and Kelly asked this question in one of her sessions where she said, like, who were you before the world told you what to be? And I had never had that question be asked to me before, and I was like, oh wow, like it just kind of like hit me really emotionally. And I think that sort of like kicked off this spiral for the past maybe 3 or 4 years of me just diving into that in my own way, in a very maybe slow and I don't know, just like introductory space, and then diving deeper and deeper and deeper. to where I reached this point in my life a couple months ago where I was like, I need to make some bigger changes, and I need to be open, create space and open my mind and my life to new opportunities and just try things rather than having this very calculated version of my life. And that led to where I'm at now. So I recently quit my job. It's been about a week now that I've been into this either self-employed or unemployed lifestyle, and just seeing where it takes me. So that's kind of a short answer to the long thing that we'll probably dive into of what brought me here.
So this question of who were you before the world told you who to be?
Mm-hmm.
Had you ever been asked a question like that before, or thought about something like that?
Never been asked a question like that. And I also, because I'm very much like a goal-oriented person, and it's like, okay, someone tells you that this is the goal, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get there first, or like, I'm going to work really, really hard to like be the best at that. And that's my mentality. And when I like see something, I go after it. And so that question of like, who were you before the world told you who to be? It just like, it hit me like really right in the heart. And I was like, what have I been going after in my life that like maybe isn't truly something I want to be going after? Or what are the decisions or lifestyle choices that I've made that maybe aren't really mine or someone else's? Whether that's your parents or culturally or friends, whoever, comparisons, and just starting to dive into like, who am I guess, which sounds like a crazy question to ask yourself in your early to mid 30s. Because I think you always think when you're younger, like, oh, by the time I'm 30, like I'll have it all figured out. And then you reach that point and you're like, I don't know anything. And I guess just being willing to explore that and be okay with kind of throwing some things out the window.
Well, I can completely resonate with that idea of trying to figure out who you are. You know, I think probably within the last hour, I probably asked, who am I, and what am I doing? You know, I think it's a healthy question to ask as you think about, you know, who was Renee before the world told you who to be?
Oh, good question. I think she was, I mean, there is still a part of me that is this, but like I said this before, like very goal oriented, very much about achievement and being seeing it for myself as someone that went after things and accomplished what they set out to do. I'm a type 1 Enneagram. I don't know if you dove into the Enneagrams yet?
A little bit, but remind me what type 1 means.
So type 1 is, so there's a type 1, one of the biggest characteristics is about the inner critic. And so for me, there's this constant voice in my head of like, what's right, what's wrong, very black and white, likes rules, the rules that they define as important, and is constantly trying to measure up to this version of themselves that they've created in their mind. And I think what's been really interesting is I have historically always been a very black and white person. So the first question you asked was like, who was Renee before all this? Like, I would say I was very black and white. It was like, it was either this or it was that. There was good emotions, there was bad emotions, there was success, there was failure. And I think one thing that I've been trying to really focus on as of late is being okay with holding space for what can feel like very paradoxical emotions. And I think kind of getting to this point of quitting my job and figuring out what's next, it was really about being okay with having these kind of like opposite feelings of like being really excited, but also in a sense grieving a vision or a life that I thought I was going to quote unquote achieve or be living how I had planned it out. And I think that's just been like a learning experience. And I constantly am having to like check myself of like, okay, like it's okay to have like sad emotions and anger emotions and frustration emotions. And at the same time, you also can have happiness and excitement and all the joyful things that we always want in life, right? So kind of where I'm at right now.
Going back to this, this kind of identity as the very driven person and goal-oriented person, even that part of you, do you think that there was a version of Renee before that, or is that what you've always remembered? The reason I ask that is, I would consider myself in many ways the same. And a lot of my early memories are, being driven to achieve in school, and through elementary school, I cared about my grades, and starting in middle school, I got all A's all through middle school, and it was always very kind of mission oriented, get good grades. I know the path. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get the good job. Yet I'm not sure I would say that was, really the most kind of original version of me. Like I think to 3, 4, 5-year-old Chad, just like building with Legos and creating things and building these, worlds and imagining these things in my mind and playing outside. And so even that kind of driven version of me, in some ways I felt like was learned and was like, oh, this is maybe what people want me to do, or people seem to like it when I'm this version of me. Do you think there was a version of Renee even before this really driven, type 1 Enneagram Renee?
Type 1, type A. Yes. I think it happens with all children. Like when you think about your childhood self, and being willing to just imagine different things. And I remember growing up, I always would be, playing growing up, and I would have these, I guess, unrealistic lifestyles where I was a famous singer, and then I was an architect, and I was also a teacher, and you could fill your days with all these different career paths. And then I also had 3 kids, and I was 18, all these crazy things. I do think that the little Renee was definitely much more creative and spontaneous, and saw the world with much more confidence, maybe, of yes, you can do anything. You can be successful at anything, because you didn't have the I guess outside voices telling you oh, that's silly, or oh, you're never going to accomplish that. And I didn't have a lot of those negative voices growing up, but I do think growing up, you'd have experiences where you learn the boundaries of life, I guess. And then you try to fit into what am I going to be within those boundaries? So yeah, I think part of, I guess, reorienting or recalibrating yourself around who do you want to be, and who are you? Maybe there's a version of that where you're diving into that post or pre-childhood self and asking okay, what does little Renee or little Chad have to say about the life that we're living right now? I think that could be an interesting exercise.
Well, I noticed you used the word realistic as you were talking about some of the, as a young child, some of the visions or dreams you had for your life, and you said that they weren't realistic, and that's a word that I still come up against a lot in my life today, because I think a mentor of mine, Manny, talks about this a lot, where as children, we're dreamers. We believe we can be Tom Brady, and we believe we can be a professional singer, and we believe I think from 3rd or 4th grade, we did this exercise where we wrote every single student in the class wrote, their vision for 2025. And I said I was going to be a professional soccer player. And we all have these kind of wild dreams, and then I feel like that we learn that label of realistic, and these dreams that we have aren't realistic because of XYZ. And then I say I come up a lot against that now, just because I'm looking at, I live in a van, and I have for a year and a half, and I've been traveling the country, and so many aspects of my life in trying to start businesses and trying to still figure out, as we're talking about, like who the heck I am, I feel like so much of what my life looks like right now, previous versions or older versions of me would say, well, that's not very realistic. It's not a really realistic life choices that I'm making. And so I guess I'm curious where you feel like you learned or what happened from that dreaming version of you to then labeling those things as not realistic.
I wish you could pinpoint one thing. I think it's perhaps a lot to do with the culture that we live in. I think there's a lot of just like pre-prescribed plans that were kind of just set into motion when you start life. And I think a lot of that's changing now, which is really exciting. But I know, like, for me growing up, there was always these like predefined ingredients that you were supposed to have. And then those ingredients would all create this like end result, which was your successful life. And so that was like, okay, finish high school, go to college, get a degree, then get a job. And, you're probably going to be making great money when you get out of college, right out of college, and you're going to have no problem finding a job. And then in college, you're going to meet the person of your dreams, and then you're going to have kids, and you're going to like go off into the sunset. And I feel like those were like, there was like this checkbox of like, these are the things you have to do, and it's going to create this fulfilling life for you. And then I think I just know a lot of people that we kind of went through that. And I sometimes even see that like in my parents and my friends' parents, where it's like, okay, we did the checkbox thing, and that didn't create what I thought it was going to create, or it didn't lead to the fulfillment that I thought it was going to lead to. And so I think a lot of it is just like culturally or habit of just like, this is what you're supposed to do. And then you have people in the world like you and Eileen that are like, hey, let's throw that rule book out the window and like see what we can create with new ingredients. And then people see that, and it's super encouraging and inspiring to be like, well, what can I throw out the window and figure out if I add a new ingredient, like what could I create? And I think that's a really exciting thing that's happening right now, just in general. I think a lot of people are reaching those points in their life where they're like, what am I doing? Like, what should I be doing? And maybe taking a jump.
It's kind of that idea. I'll talk about it with my mom pretty often, where she'll say, and she's approaching 60 now, and she'll say, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I get older. Yeah. And I think that's kind of a fun concept to just sort of embrace and accept that. You talked about this idea of having it all figured out by the time you hit your 30s, and Paul Scheer and I, in a couple episodes back, we're talking about the same thing, where I think as we're young, we think that there's going to reach this point where we've got it all figured out, and we have this sense of kind of peace, being like, okay, I know exactly who I am, and I've achieved all that I want to achieve. So walk me through this process of, this awareness. You were asked this question 3 or 4 years ago, and that started to bring some of your awareness around, maybe there's something else out there for me, or maybe there is this version of Renee that existed before the world taught me, who I should be. Well, I guess first let's, fill in some of the gaps, I guess, between
the 3 year, 4 year gap.
Yeah. And tell us about the path that you have been on professionally, because hearing you talk about how you are a very driven person, and like the way that I've gotten to know you and experience you, I've always looked up to you as someone who, you just seem like you're on this mission, and like no matter what's going to be thrown at you, you're going to be good at it. You're going to be effective at it. You can speak about what you do with confidence. Just kind of seeing about how you would operate and go about your work, and you were rising through your company. And so that idea that I feel like you were doing so many of the things that so many people would say, like, that's amazing. That's fantastic. And I would look at you and say, wow, maybe I should be more like Renee. So just kind of tell us about the path that you were on that ultimately you decided, recently that you were going to pivot from.
All right, cool. I'm going to go back a little bit farther. So I think one thing that I just want to point out before I start on this, one thing you said at the beginning was like the awareness. I think like the self-awareness and the self-reflection is a really important piece of feeling like you're aligned to who you want to be or who you truly feel like is authentic to you. And one thing that I think I've always struggled with is I didn't have a ton of self-awareness because I was so goal-oriented. It was like, all right, there's the finish line, head down, sprint towards it as fast as you can. And then when you get to it, then you look up. And so I think what has happened to me in like my life chunks is I've been sprinting towards goals and then I look up and I'm like, okay, where's the next one? And then I sprint to that. And so 2016 is about when I started at my former organization, Tilt. I actually had done a bit of a life pivot before that. I went to school for accounting, and I kind of went into that major not knowing what I wanted to do with my life going into college, which I think a lot of 17, 18-year-olds feel. They're like, pick a career for the rest of your life. And you're like, oh, okay, this one. But being my rational self, which I think you said this earlier, I think you and I can relate to some of those attributes of like, okay, what's going to give me job security and stability? And when I come out of college, I'm going to have a job. And it was like accounting, become a CPA. And that's what my older brother had done as well. So I went into that career path. And around my junior year, I was like, I don't know, this doesn't feel like this is the right choice for me, but people told me like, you're really good at math and maybe accounting's right. And like, FYI, everyone, like accounting is not math at all, but it was like, okay, that works, which has nothing to do with thinking back to like my childhood self of like being a famous singer or like being an architect or all the other things that you had like your dream careers. Now I'm in accounting. So I also, because I like to start the things that I finish, I was like, nope, I already chose this major. Like, this is your life that you're going to live. And I got a job at PwC, which is one of the big four accounting firms. And I did that for a couple of years. And Nate jokes about, well, I don't know if it's a joke. It's a joke now that we got through this, but he's like, I don't know if we would still be together if you would have kept that job because you were completely like, you just weren't happy. You weren't a fun person to be around. You were really miserable. And after 2 years of that job, I was like, I think I have to make a change. Like, what's the most risk averse way that I can make a change in my life? And I was like, you know what? I always wanted to go back to grad school. I'm going to quit and I'm going to go back to grad school for my MBA, which still feels like it's in that business pathway. A lot of people get their MBAs once they're in a business career. I was like, this is a smart, and it'll give me a little bit of space to figure out what's next. So I did that for a couple of years, 2-year program. And after that, I got this opportunity to work for Tom Lasorda. He was the old CEO of Chrysler. And after he retired from Chrysler, he started a venture capital fund called Inkwell. And he found me through the Wingate, which is a golf course that I worked at all throughout college, which I guess that's just a lesson in everything in life is about like networking and who you know, and you never know what might recross paths for you. So he gave me an opportunity to work at Inkwell and then also at his mainly launching and running his daughter's mail order bakery, which was called The Baker's Tale. And after 2 years of that, some things happened and she decided she wanted to have a life pivot and move on from that. And he's like, what do you want to do? And he connected me to Lawrence, who is the partner at Tilt. It was the Frameworks then. And I was like, I want to do like marketing and strategy. Like that's where I feel like it kind of combines the right side and the left side of your brain, where accounting was only like the very analytical side. Marketing and advertising, like that can kind of be this blend that I'm looking for between like art and science and analytical and free thinking.
Do you think if you could have gone back and chosen, kind of re-chosen your major or chosen a major at that time that felt more in alignment with what you wanted to do, would you have gone more of that marketing strategy route at that time?
Oh, that's a hard question. I don't like thinking about like regret a lot, or maybe regret isn't the right word to use for that. I don't think I would change it. And I'm saying that because I feel like if I wanted to go into something else, I could always go back to school now. But I'm very grateful for the experience that I had in that realm. And I think even my experience at PwC, it built hey, Sadie, it built a lot of just foundational experience and learning how to work in like a huge conglomerate of an organization. Like, I don't know. I would not change that.
I started this podcast for a very specific reason. I crave meaningful conversations and wanted to create an outlet to have more of them in my life. By recording discussions I was already having with friends and new conversations with new people, I guess I just wanted to bring deeper, more thoughtful conversations to a larger audience because I think we all have an opportunity to grow from them. I got to tell you, it makes me uncomfortable to do so, but I'm asking for your help. I'm imagining a show funded by the people who want to support deeper conversations. So for the cost of 2 coffees per month, you can help keep this show going, and as a thank you, get access to some exclusive behind-the-scenes content that isn't available anywhere else. In the episode description is a link to our Patreon where you can pledge your support and automatically get access to all the bonuses. So after the show, I'd love if you'd head there and check it out, and thank you in advance for your support. Okay, back to the episode. Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. Okay, so marketing and strategy though was kind of calling to you.
Calling to me. I got connected with the framework/Tilt, and I started. One thing that I haven't been afraid to do through the course of my career is make lateral moves versus like the traditional vertical pathway. I came into Tilt with the experience of doing more like operations and finance. And that was the role that they had open at the time. And Lawrence was awesome. And he was like, hey, create your own job description. Like you have to start in here, but like, what do you want? And I was like, okay, I'll come in and I'll do the finance and operations side, but like, I really want to get into strategy. Like that's where I'm really passionate about right now and something that I think I could be really good at. Starting in 2016, I took on the finance and operations. At that time, we were like a 5-person agency, which is something that I really love, is like that sort of startup feel. And I started with the, I guess, goal or ambition of really leading the strategy department at Tilt, which is really where I was at this past year. So I kind of over the course of the first 2 years moved into a more of a full-time strategy role. And then back in 2020, I became the director of strategy at Tilt. And so what I was doing there is, I guess my title is director of brand strategy. And so what that meant is going into organizations, analyzing their business and their brand and saying like, what do you mean to people? I think we all know like there's all this buzz around like purpose-driven organizations, and you can't just be a product or service to people. They want to have a relationship with you, which is a little bit of BS. But at the end of the day, it's like, what is the story that you're telling the world beyond, okay, we make widgets or we sell computers or whatever it might be. And so I've really enjoyed diving into the story angle of what started something, why does it continue to exist, why is it culturally relevant today. But I was now doing that in an organization that is now 40 people. Maybe there's some twists and turns happening that as the organization grows, it naturally changes courses and pivots in different ways. And I think back in 2019, I'm trying to tie this back together, Kelly asked that question, and it planted a seed in my being to just maybe start asking questions that contradict the path you're on. And this was not by any means a like brash or like, oh, she asked that question and I'm going to completely like change my life. It was more of just, like I said, a seed where it was like, just start like testing and evaluating if the things that in the path that you're on are really aligning to like who you want to be and what you want to create in the world. And you just talked about one of your mentors. So one of my mentors is Jim Hiller. And starting in 2020 during COVID, I started having weekly conversations with him because I was like, hey, I'm starting to question like what I'm really doing and if it's really fulfilling to me, or if it was just a goal that I had and now I'm really close to it and I want to just like keep, banging down the wall. And he brought up this really like good, I don't know what you call them, like mentor lessons to me about the way that we start to evaluate our lives. And he's like, you don't have to evaluate your entire life on this one continuous path. And he's like, you should think about it in chunks, or I think he called them lumens or something that the Romans used to distinguish, like, there's these personal development periods that you're going to have in your life. And when one stops, another one's going to start. And rather than thinking about your life as this one long continuous thing towards something, think about it in these like personal development chunks of accomplishment. And then you don't have to evaluate yourself on one goal or one thing. And for me, that was like another, watering of that seed of like, oh, maybe I can change. Maybe I can make a move. And I guess from there, it just kept kind of blossoming. I kept asking the questions. Nate and I had a lot of conversations around like when the right time might be for me to leave, or if it was even the right timing. I think timing is important. If we could talk about that. And then it led to this past May or June when I was like, it's time. Like, I had this sense of confidence in myself that I was willing to, I guess, quote unquote, bet on myself in a way that I had never had before in the past. And I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to accept failure. I'm ready to accept that, there's going to be these paradoxical experiences like we were talking about earlier, that maybe I'll have a really great day and maybe I'll have a really low day and experience, and I'm going to be okay with that. And that's where I'm at now.
As you talk about some of these questions or things that you started questioning, walk us through what some of those things were that you found yourself maybe continuously coming back to and sort of wondering about or questioning, could this be different? Were there some things that stood out to you that you kept kind of reoccurringly coming back to?
I think one of the main things was just like a self-check on the way that I was feeling about like waking up every day and doing something. And so one thing that I know I still really love is like the work that I was doing with clients was really exciting. Like getting to be able to come in and talk with them about their business and their vision, and talking to their stakeholders and audiences about like, why is this meaningful to you? And we still have a lot of healthcare clients that are just doing really amazing things in cancer cures and urology and all this stuff. So I found that very rewarding. But at the end of the day, I guess, like thinking about when I wake up in the morning, yes, every day is not going to be this like, yes, I love what I do. But I found myself over the course of the past couple of years almost like dreading going to meetings and not having enough time to spend on the things that I felt like I thought were my priorities. And because I was always working, and we recently moved here to Arizona, and we've been here for the past year and a half. And that first year, it was so like, there's all these new things to be doing. And there would be nights where I would just be like working really late and not having these experiences that I wanted to have with Nate, Jared, and Orla. And so I think it just continued to, I guess, snowball from there of like, are the things that I say are my priorities and the things that I want to nurture and cultivate in my life, is that aligning with the behaviors and the things that I'm actually doing? It's not an easy evaluation, and sometimes the answer isn't what you want to hear, but I guess that's kind of what started to snowball from it. But I don't think it was reoccurring questions. I think it was really more of just like continuing to self-evaluate and just really think about like, what do you want out of life, and who do you want to be spending your time with?
And as you sit here now, what were those answers as far as what you wanted out of life and who you wanted to spend your time with and who you wanted to become? What did you find?
Definitely Nate. I think he's at the top of the list. But I guess one thing for myself was that I don't have the answer to your question in like a beautiful, articulate way. But I do know what are the things that I want to be doing. So one thing that I want to be doing is creating and holding space for myself to explore ideas and opportunities and feelings that I never felt like I could when I was younger. I think when you're, and maybe you can relate to this, when you do reach that point in your childhood where you're like, the switch comes on, you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta accomplish things. I think you start to ignore a lot of feelings that I would classify as bad feelings, of like frustration and anger and things that maybe I should have like processed that I never did. And you just kind of ignore it because you're going after something and you're looking for the positive reinforcements. So one thing that I know that I really want out of this next chapter of my life is being able to create space to have ideas and try new things. I want to spend time and be around people that have, I mean, everyone's going to say this sounds super cliche, but like have the same like values as I do. I think this is happening from my perspective in a lot of industries where people are working in organizations and I think they question like, am I working for people that I believe in or that have the same values as me or that treats people the way that I would treat people? And so I think I want to be around in my everyday life and in my career life. I want to be around people that share those values and really value people. Like, I think a lot of times in business, you can get away from like the fact that this is where we spend, I don't know what's the statistic of like how much time you spend in your job versus how much time you spend living your life.
I don't even know the exact number, but it's a high percentage, right? Very, very high.
So when you think about that, it's like, if I'm going to be spending all this time or maybe not if you change the rule book, right? But what I want to be spending most of my time with the people that are pushing me and challenging me, asking me questions that maybe I'm too scared to ask myself. Those are the people I want to be around. And more specifically, I guess, be around people that also create a safe space for you to make mistakes and try new things. I think that's one thing that I'm just super grateful for of Nate is he is the person that was like, has always created that space for me of feeling really safe and saying like, hey, it's okay to break down and it's okay to not be the best at something. Like, we'll figure it out together. And I think I want to be around more people that are like that are just willing to put themselves out there and be uncomfortable and let's try new things together and create something new.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's an important, element in something that's shouldn't be just glossed over, which is that, that Eileen and I just had a conversation about this, last week, but finding someone in your life, whatever label that person's going to be, if you're going to be married, if they're a partner, if it's going to be a friend, if it's going to be, whoever it might be, but having someone in your life, and hopefully maybe it can be more than just one person, but someone who can really support you through all phases and all of the ways that you show up and all of the good and all of the bad. I mean, I think that's just such an important thing, and someone that encourages you to dive into the unknown and challenge the way that you've thought. And, Eileen has been that for me. And I also think of my mom as just been a consistent presence in my life when I wanted to take all these steps, quote unquote, backwards. And I wanted to leave General Motors after I'd been there for 1 year. And I wanted to sell my things and move back home with her and live in her basement and become a janitor. And she was like, yeah, I think you should do it. I think you should go for it. I just think about that idea of having those people and having, someone like a Nate in your life. It's just such an important thing, isn't it?
It's super invaluable. I feel like really lucky and really blessed to have him and a lot of other people that are in my life that I guess, yeah, just encourage that and hold space for that, which I think is really, really important. People are irreplaceable.
Yeah, well, you're completely right. And the more I try to go through life sometimes alone and kind of grit my teeth and figure it out by myself, the more I seem to get reminded of the fact that it's not a good idea. It's a lot easier when you're in relationship with people and you have people around you.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Do you experience that as well? Like that feeling of trying to go at it alone?
For sure. I actually hadn't thought about it until you just said it. And when you said it, it really resonated with me. I think I've always been a very independent person, even as a child, of just like, all right, like rely on yourself to get it done. And I do think the just like appreciation and love for the people that you have around you supporting you, and like they're there and they want you to be a part of your life and to support it and have you lean on them. That's been a learned action for me. And I do think like having those experiences and I guess appreciating and taking the opportunity that those people are giving you to like lean on them has been something that has been really, really valuable to me that I didn't always have in the past.
Did you sort of tie that, that being a very driven person, goal-oriented person, and being independent, did those kind of go together for you?
Yeah, I think so. I never had thought about it until now, but I think that's probably very true. Of they were connected together, of like success and independence, being able to rely on yourself, not having to rely on others. Yeah, that definitely strikes a chord.
Well, just because I've found that through my therapy and just learning about myself and kind of unraveling all that I am, I've found that I've taken this sense of pride in being able to do things on my own and do it by myself and be independent, and that's been this point of pride for me. And yet I just continue to find it leaves me in a at times very lonely place. And logically, I can say, well, I think we're meant to be in relationship with people, and I think we're meant to do things together. But then when it comes time to actually do it, I keep falling back to this idea that, well, no, maybe I just need to do it on my own. And so I've just noticed that that's kind of a recurring thing for me. And that's why I was curious if you had felt that too.
Yeah, I think that probably is like, that sounds very much like American culture of like being independent and picking yourself up by your bootstraps and like pushing it forward yourself. I think that's culturally very ingrained in us. But yeah, that absolutely resonates with me of feeling like, I guess, or maybe having that tension or argument in your mind of like, do it yourself and like prove it to yourself versus do it with people. And I can probably confidently say that every time you do it with people, the end product is that much better when we're working with people. But not only am I very self-critical of myself, I'm also critical of others. Nate will be the first one to tell you about this. And so I think a lot of times you can get in this mindset of like, okay, well, they're not going to do it the way that I would want it to be done, so I'm just going to do it myself too. And I guess a big lesson for me that I've been learning the past few years is like, they might not do it the way that you would do it, but be okay with that and like take a step back and learn from what they're doing. And ultimately, like, maybe you get to a different place that you thought you were going to be, but it's going to be that much better. So yeah, that's been a good lesson.
I think that's a perspective that I needed to hear today. So thank you for sharing that. I found that very valuable. So I'm curious then, as I reached out to you, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is I'm so fascinated by it. At one point I was toying around with calling this podcast something along the lines of The Pivot, or something about something kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
Because something I'm just so curious about is it comes up so often, like when we built the van and we live in the van and we're traveling, and so many people will say to us like, I'm so jealous. I wish I was doing that. I want to be doing that so badly. And so I'm just so curious about this idea and this concept of how there seems to be pretty commonly, I notice that people have this vision for their life that's oftentimes somehow, some way different than what their life currently looks like. And this could be work oriented, this could be travel oriented, this could be identity oriented, it could be so many things. And societally, I just feel like there seems to be a gap between people recognizing and wanting something different and then actually doing something about it. And so walk us through, what do you attribute to kind of moving you from, okay, you're doing this questioning, you had this question posed to you 3 or 4 years ago. You're starting to cultivate more awareness. You're starting to question some of the things. You're starting to think about what your priorities are. How did you actually go from that to doing something about it, if you had to dissect that?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is just really getting in tune with yourself. And there is definitely a gut element in this, in the sense of like trusting your gut. Once you start to tune into yourself and really figuring out like what feels like I'm on the right path, what feels like I'm on the wrong path, which sounds kind of woo-woo, but like that was my experience of like, you just start to get this feeling of like, oh, this just doesn't feel right. Or all this, so I'm doing something like this, like really sounds like that's what I want to do. And just continuing to dive into that gut feeling of like what feels right, what feels wrong. And then I think the other thing is this is not breaking news, but like, it's not going to be easy, and you're going to have to potentially reprioritize things in your life. One of the conversations that Nate and I had, because this is another pathway, but like he also is self-employed right now as well. I think timing was a big thing for us. We were moving all of last year. Nate was having some health issues back in 2020, 2021, and is kind of recovering from that. Like a lot of, as I was going through this journey, the timing just wasn't right for what was happening, what other things were happening in my life to like make a big move like that. And so being, I guess, okay with like, okay, I'm going to continue down this path, knowing that I'm just going to continue to explore like, okay, what, when it does reach that point where the timing does feel a little bit better, there's never a time where it feels absolutely right. Being ready to make that move. And so going back to that, we had to talk about like, okay, what would we be willing to give up for some of the things that we might want in our future? And I'm sure you and Eileen have had to have the same conversation of like, there are things that we might have to give up. So I really like Lululemon leggings, and Nate loves like flannels and shirts, and I like expensive skincare. And trying to find a balance of, okay, if we both are going to be self-employed or not working right now, what are the things that we're willing to sacrifice on, because we know that we're trading it in for something else that we want. And you're never going to have this like big jump that you take and you get to take all of the things that you like about your current life into that next life. I think there's always going to be some form of like compromise, or what potentially could feel like sacrifice now, but just feeling really confident about like, I know that this is going to create something else that I really, really want. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Well, when she hears this, she'll probably roll her eyes, like I think she does probably every time I say this, but I'll often say to Eileen, the idea of just in life, I'm kind of this believer in like, we can have anything, but we can't have everything.
Yes.
And so let's be really intentional about defining what that anything is for us, and what we want that to mean, and what we want that to look like. And if that's the case, then what are we willing to sacrifice? And I don't always, I think that word sacrifice you talked about is a great word. I don't always mean it. It doesn't always have to be physical things or monetary things, but sometimes we have to sacrifice in order to define what we want anything to be. Sometimes we have to sacrifice comfort. Sometimes we have to sacrifice security. Sometimes we have to sacrifice, there's other things. So aside from maybe some of the more material things, what else do you feel like you had to come to terms with sacrificing in order to make this jump?
Comfort and stability ring really true. There's this quote in my chiropractor's office, and I'm going to botch it, but it's something like progress and comfort can never coexist, or like you can't have progress without leaving comfort behind, or something like that. And to me, it's really, really true. And I think that we go through stages in life where you're probably going to like lean more towards progress and change, and then need to lean more towards like comfort and stability. And I think when you're in a relationship with someone, sometimes you're doing that at different times. So I think like Nate had a period where he was going through a lot of change and making progress. And I felt like, okay, I need to be more of the like stability and security side to balance that out. And then now we've reached this point where we are like, okay, well, what if we both were leaning more into the change and transformation side? What would that look like? And I think I definitely have had to, I don't like risk. Like I'm a very risk averse person, and I've had to definitely give up some of my desires to have stability, to have a regular paycheck, to know that I can afford the things that I want to buy without like thinking, like having to question like, okay, wait, do I really need this? And at the same time, it's also just like really exciting. And I guess this goes back to like a lot of emotions and things are true for me right now. Like, I think I'm still grieving a little bit of the path that I was on, and then also just being really excited and encouraged of what could be. And I don't know, I'm still learning a lot. But yeah, giving up comfort and stability is a big thing, I think. But when you have people around you that are always like those constant people, I think maybe stability can come from something that I didn't always think it could come from. Like I always assigned it to like money and job security and having a nice house. And maybe now it's the people, like that's my stability and security. And that gives me the, I don't know, extra boost to go out in the world and try something new.
Well, I think that's really interesting, challenging some of these kind of traditional words and what they mean. Security, stability. I've found myself doing some of that as well. And it's just like success is a big one. Risk has been an interesting one that I've been looking at recently. And just thinking about some of those things and, going back to that idea of just questioning and being willing to take a look at, how is this typically defined? And if I wanted to define it my way, what would that look like for me? And that's been a very interesting process to just take that step back and pause for a second and think about the idea that the way that we interpret these words doesn't have to necessarily be the way that we interpret them forever.
I think that's spot on. I love that. I also think a word you just said, like the pause, I think it's really hard a lot of times to press pause on your life. And especially when it feels like you're always on a timetable of some sorts, or you're going to miss something if you don't keep, going as fast as possible. The pause is so valuable. Like that's, I almost feel like that's where I'm at right now in my life, as I am doing a pause. I left my job and I'm in this new spot, but I don't know where I'm going next. And I am really embracing that idea, I think, of the pause, of just being and experiencing what comes in my path and what feels really right, or what gets me really excited, and exploring what that could be. So I like the idea of encouraging and creating space for this pause in life.
Yeah. And so you've kind of pushed pause on your life, and to be clear, there isn't a defined next step or next path that you're taking, right?
There is not. I do think one of the things that you previously asked, which I feel like I didn't fully answer, but like, what are the things that are the priorities for right now, or the things that are most important? I think one thing that Nate and I have both like defined as a number one priority for both of us is health. Like making sure that we're in really good health, and our bodies are supporting us in a way that allows us to do the activities and things we want to do. And also we're supporting our bodies in the way that it needs to heal from things and things like that. And so making sure that we have that as like our shared priority together has been helpful. Sorry, I forgot what your last question was.
Well, I was just kind of asking about this idea of, hitting this pause button and not being super clear on what's next. And the reason I ask it is because as soon as I heard that you had left your job, my mind, and going back to this idea of like kind of being realistic, and my mind went to, first of all, that's amazing. Second of all, I'm assuming she's going to probably take all of the knowledge and contacts, everything that she has in this brand strategy world, and go off on her own and now maybe operate her own consulting or marketing consulting. I immediately assume that you're going to take this kind of realistic path and you're just going to go off on your own. You're going to pivot a little bit, but stay in the lane that you were in. Is that even the case? Or are you open to exploring something completely outside of the lane that you were in?
Right now, I think it's kind of both. I feel really lucky that the skills and capabilities that I have in like brand strategy and like business consulting lends itself to like contract projects. So I am still doing some contract projects with Tilt, which was my former employer, and then also just from different connections. I guess I get to choose which projects those are. And if they feel like, hey, I need more time for something else, and maybe I don't do that. But it is a nice safety net, or like a compromise of like, okay, you don't have the full safety net, but you have a little bit of a safety net. So I'm still doing a little bit of that. But where my heart leans is more towards the latter of doing something completely different that probably takes my experience in branding and marketing and operations and all the things and applies it towards something new. We just talked a lot about like the people that we have in our lives, and Nate and I, like, we're really blessed to just have really great friends and always be around great people. And I know we've talked about this with you and Eileen of like just throwing ideas out about like doing something with the people that you really trust and care about and have like-minded values. And I know they always say like, don't get into business with your friends, but I do feel like there's, I don't know, we know really, really great people, and the idea of creating something with those people is like really exciting to us. And so we're definitely holding a special space for that.
I love that. Well, I think, again, just leaning into that unknown and just being open. And, I love that the idea of just kind of holding space for things to present themselves, to come into your life. I think if we reflect on those like versions of ourselves that are, you have to have this one goal, you have to be moving towards that one thing, it doesn't allow for opportunity and unknown things to come into the equation that maybe and this is something that I've been chatting a lot with Nate about, is this idea of just surrendering and being more open to, what if this exact very direct path that I think I need to go on, what if that's not the only option? And what if that could be a really beautiful and good thing? If I could be open to other things coming my way. So I appreciate that you, even in a time of unknown, even in a time of having to make some sacrifices, it seems like you still are open and holding space for things that might come your way.
And it really is encouraging to, I guess, one, hear that from you, but also like you and Eileen have been a source of inspiration to me for that. And we have other friends, like Jared is doing something completely new. Like I have a lot of friends in my life now that are just like not, it's always going to be scary. So I don't want to say like that aren't afraid of just like challenging it, but it's just like our opening themselves up and being available to leaning into like changing something big and throwing the traditional ingredients out the window and seeing what could be. And I think the more people you have around in your orbit that are doing something similar, it definitely gives you more fuel and more, I guess maybe that's where comfort's coming from, is having those like-minded people doing some of the same things in different ways. And it's exciting. We don't need the rule book, right?
Yeah. Screw the rule book. Well, I think,
screw it.
that environment and the type of people that you surround yourself with, I think just plays such a big role in
absolutely
in if you're and I feel the same way to call you a friend, to call Nate, Jared, to call you all friends, and to have people, and this podcast has been fun to engage in some of these conversations with people that typically we were already having offline, but now to bring them into larger audiences. And just that reminder of, if I'm surrounding myself and consistently, and this was one of just the whys behind starting the show, is that if I'm consistently engaging with people who are challenging themselves, are stepping into the unknown, are questioning things, are being willing to take different paths, then doing all of those things feels a lot more approachable than if no one around you or no one in your life is doing that. I wonder if you feel like you would have made these same decisions if you didn't have examples of people close to you who were kind of pushing the boundaries, so to speak.
I mean, I would love to think that I would, but I think there absolutely is an element of like seeing examples and wanting to take a piece of that for yourself and make it your own. So I definitely think there's people in my life that have been inspirations to that, and then also people who are just really encouraging to say like, yeah, you're gonna kill it, whatever you do, or whatever that like extra motivational saying might be. So yeah, I definitely think like we've been talking about, just surrounding yourself with those people that will challenge you. And I do think that they're like the rational side of my brain always goes to, there's always going to be a balance. So like, yes, there's a time to challenge what you thought and to ask the question that you shouldn't be asking. But there is also a time to appreciate the things that you have. I think there's always this like tension in our lives of like wanting to be ambitious and wanting more, but then also being really appreciative of the things that you also have right now. And so finding the balance between those two things, I think, is where I'm hoping my sweet spot's going to be.
I love that perspective. As we start to wrap up the conversation, you've kind of talked about this, some of, re-engaging maybe some of the childhood tendencies you had, and in thinking about future, Renee, I'm not a big fan of like, what's your kind of 5-year vision for yourself, but as you think about in 5 years, in a few years, what are some of the things about your life that you want to be true? As you think about some of those priorities and some of the things that you want to focus on, what are just some of the things that are like, you know what, I just want this to be the case in my life, no matter what I'm doing?
I mean, well, number one, I said this earlier, I want to be in good health, and I want the people that I care about to also be in good health. I want to, I don't know if this is vision or if this is like the priorities, but I want to make sure that myself and other people have a space to come to where they feel like they can take that pause and really start to question things. And this is like, I don't know what that is going to be or what that will evolve into, but like, that's what I've like been feeling this like calling or attraction to, is like creating some sort of space like that. Because I mean, we're all just a product of our own experiences, and we see the world through that. Like, having the experience of being able to take a step back and take pauses in my life, I'm so grateful for them. And I'm so grateful for the people that I have around me that have supported that journey. And I want other people to have that. Like, I want more people to lean into those like heretical questions that they don't feel like they should be asking. And it's like, well, where could I go? Or who could I be around? Or what could I do that could make me feel a little bit more comfortable or safe about starting that process. So that's like what I'm feeling called toward, and I'm hoping becomes a part of like my life, some sort of space like that. And I don't see myself going back to a traditional like 9-to-5 job, or I definitely don't want to go work for a big company, but just working with people that are passionate and share this like value of wanting to, I don't know, just experience like all the roller coasters of life together and make it fun and laugh along the way. Like, that sounds so cliche now that it's coming out of my mouth, but like, that's what I want. I want that, that space to create that for people.
I appreciate everything that you have shared today. And, I just have a lot of respect for the journey that you've been on, and to make some of these decisions and to embrace stepping into the unknown. The way that I see you as someone being just incredibly smart and capable and talented. And I have no doubt that you will continue to do incredible and amazing things. And so I'm just, a fan or whatever it may be, a friend that is excited to see what this journey unfolds for you. And I hope that you can continue to tap into that, that gut and listen to what feels right and what feels like is going to lead you in directions that are going to be fulfilling. But I can't wait to see how this journey unfolds. And I appreciate you being willing to share everything that's led up to this point.
Oh, thank you, Chad. That means a lot. And the feelings of respect are very much mutual. And I know our paths will continue to be crossing many times, hopefully, as we move forward on this life thing.
Agreed. I sure hope so. If people wanted to get in touch with you or follow your journey, what are some ways that they might be able to do that?
I don't know. I guess they could. I don't want to get it. I shouldn't give my phone number on. I'll give you my Instagram, Rechevri, RACHEVRI. But if you want to follow my journey, it probably is better for you to follow Nate because he posts way more about us.
Thanks for tuning in to today's conversation. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on right now so that you don't miss future episodes. And if you wanted to get in touch with me personally, you can head to my website, www.chadmmiles.com. Until next time, take care.